Welcome to the My Rules Are Better podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. I'm curious. Obviously I recorded the last podcast. Obviously, I'm out of hospital, back at work. I've been doing some nice things recently. I've had... We laugh about this now, me and Barney Dicker. What's the deal with you in the post? Well, I've had some miniatures from Yorkshire, a dwarf army, of just the most beautiful first and second edition dwarves, painted by my man Roachy Roachford. I've had some dwarf miniatures, painted by Roachy Roachford, who I now know as Roachy Roachford, not Roachy Roachford. I thought with an American accent I could get away with calling Roachy Roachford, but apparently it rhymes with crotch, and I did verify that with him recently. Anyway, so some beautiful dwarf miniatures, stuck in US Customs. Really only stuck for about a week, and then a bank holiday weekend, which they call here a federal holiday weekend, perhaps. They decided to let them out. So, I don't know, sometime hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I might get this amazing dwarf army and this amazing Nurgle army that Roachy painted for me over the past 6 months. And I was corresponding with Nurgling. Nurgling's going to be away from the UK until, I think, March or April next year. And my hope is to actually meet Nurgling on location and to meet Roachy, who rhymes with crotch, and a bunch of other folk in England in possibly May or April next year. I need to be very careful because my daughters are born in May and I have a wedding anniversary, 21st wedding anniversary in April. So it needs to be between my wedding anniversary and my daughter's birthday that I go to England by myself. So I meet up with a bunch of folk, including Nurgling and Roachy, hopefully, and a bunch of other folk. In fact, I've gone through really kind of strange decompression where I've realised that it's not actually my British friendships that are the problem. It's like all my friendships, well, not all my friendships. But yeah, I had an interesting correspondence with Bob Mottram, who obviously I worked on London 1940 with, and my APSDK, which was also made into open source officially through GitLab over the week. So there's been a bunch of really positive stuff, but I've been going through all my old Roachy miniatures to try to assemble the Wood Elf army, which I already have currently, amazingly, in miniature form, but he's sending me back a bunch of Wood Elves as well, and a Wood Elf dragon, which he sculpted. Really, it's been a busy 8 months for him, and what I'm assuming is probably 40 or 50 pounds worth of miniatures were grabbed by US Customs, which makes sense, actually. I wish he'd sent them to me in 10-pound packs, because I send 10-pound books internally within the US quite comfortably. Anyway, so I've been going through the miniatures, literally, 8 miniature cases, and just organising all the 40k miniatures together, because there's a bunch of Imperial Guard, including Imperial Guard that were broken that he fixed and sent back to me. So I had to fix that, and there's what we call the FedEx X package, which is the package that was held by FedEx for 3 months. Yeah, the problem is my problem with the post. So anyway, I was going through my painted dice, and I decided not to throw any of them away. I'm trying to make space. My friend Connoisites Bowen has been helping greatly. I was going to send him a couple of boxes, but I realised that actually what I need to do is do a better consolidation of the stuff that I have, which is basically going through the Roachy Roachford miniatures. And quite frankly, going through the Roachy Roachford miniatures is just like, wow. Like, wow in a positive light, not like wow as in you wake up in the hospital with a head injury. And, yeah, he's painted some amazing miniatures. Like, for folks familiar with my Facebook and probably also the My Rules Are Better Facebook page, the Nurgle Imperial Guard he did with the wings, like with the guards person with wings, and they're all like fly. What's the person's name? Anyway, World War I folk with kind of sacks over their faces, looking very much like... I shouldn't be recording a podcast today. My brain's not in capacity. But yeah, the thought of I've sent photos of the dwarf army to Nurgling, and also the Nurgle army, rather ironically. He wanted to buy a Slann army. And I was just like, okay, well, this is what's on my mind currently, which is, I shouldn't dominate the conversation in that way. But I really don't feel the need to buy an army ever again. I'm completely fulfilled. And I still have a bunch of, he still has a bunch of Nurgle to paint for me, including some, really beautiful, the Palanquins. I have 2 Palanquins of Nurgle with him still that need to be painted. They're amazing figures, but looking forward to getting them done with him. And I'm trying to slow my roll with regards to the miniature painting, just because the conditions in the US, particularly the inflation, is just insane. And it's quite funny because my mother came over when I went into hospital. Literally, she heard and hit my head. just decided, because she was planning on coming over anyway to see my daughters, that she was going to come over. So she's here currently. So inflation, a bunch of other things in the US. So it's a really good time to spend time with some Rochi miniatures. Just remind yourself about why you have this collecting hobby, which thankfully has pretty well ended. I found a Games Workshop case of the older style with a bunch of old Hammer miniatures in them, amongst other things. Like literally my miniature collection when I lived in England in 2004 that hadn't yet been painted. I found that. And that was very much a wow moment. And I've got a bunch of miniatures that I want to get to Rochi, and I've got a couple of parcels, but I've slowed that down because I sent him 3 parcels, including 1 parcel that he keep, and 2 parcels I have a Dark Elf Blood Bowl army that I purchased, I don't know, before I went to Irvine, California. And I'm doing a bunch of writing currently because my mother also has written books and is an amazing book editor. So I've been able to get her 70,000 words, including Just Plain Chaos, which no doubt is going to be a go project. Very soon, the book, as opposed to the role-playing game. I've not even ever talked about the book here. But it's a very strange book, and it's a book I've literally found writing that I wrote in 1992 and 1993, which will no doubt contribute to the Just Plain Chaos book when it's finally released. Which I'm thinking of doing I'm aiming to, because I've got my mother here, to do it within the next month of like really storm editing processing, because I've got the text. I mean, the original text as I'd written it was about 25,000 words. The writing from 1993 is 42 pages, so it's probably about 40,000 words. So between the two of them, I want to edit it down to about 35 to 40,000 words in total. And I've got my mother here who's like a book editor. Well, she's not. She's an author. She's never been... Well, actually, she has. She's been a historian editor at one time. But yes, so that thing might actually come out very quickly. And I was looking at my painted dice today, because I've still kept all my painted dice. Still kept all my dice. I realized that it's actually a really interesting time for people who own dice, because I own a bunch of dice. Forget the miniatures. The dice alone are pretty impressive. And I realized that I haven't actually thrown any of them away, and my room is just scattered with dice. I mean, we're probably talking 100 full sets, plus a bunch of D100s and D30s and other things that are just really eclectic. So I've been going through stuff, actually, since I got out of hospital, and just really realizing that I'm in a relatively unique position, particularly communicating with Nurgling and hearing about his Slann army. I mean, I didn't, literally... Schlam, the dwarfs, the Nurgles, what I've got coming from Rochi. I mean, I never really intended to be that guy, but I've become that guy on steroids quite recently. And I guess that's been radically addressing the lead pile over the past however many years. But I just want to record this podcast to put out a different one than I've fallen over in the hospital and I'm no longer British. But I did want to say one thing, particularly to Barney Dicker, that he was going to send me some painted dice. And quite frankly, I shouldn't be the only one with postal trouble. He should get a parcel to me together and send it over, because he's got my postal address. And I paid for his Kickstarter-esque Euro thing and a bunch of things. And I'd like to hear from Barney Dicker, either via email or via parcel. And that whole crew that I used to meet with, David Sermon and my friend in Scotland, whose name escapes me, who no doubt I recorded a podcast about recently. Anyway, all those folk, I'd like to hear back from them. I'd like to hear from them. I'd like to be like a functioning entity once again, particularly since I have this miniature collection that literally probably people would kill for in normal circumstances. I'm one day probably going to take that back to the UK. What kind of customs declaration will I need then? Anyway, I'm going to leave that thought with you now. Tom Barbalet in Las Vegas, Nevada, with a bunch of updates, signing out.